Hello, Pisces. Today's reading already feels incredibly emotional, incredibly magnetic, and honestly, a little surprising. As I sit with this energy, I can't shake the feeling that someone has been carrying thoughts of you much longer than they've been willing to admit. There seems to be a quiet realization happening behind the scenes. Feelings that were pushed aside are becoming impossible to ignore. Memories keep resurfacing, questions keep returning, and the more this person tries to focus on other things, the more their heart seems to circle back to you. Okay, here's the question. What happens when someone can no longer pretend they don't care? What happens when silence stops feeling safe and the truth becomes louder than fear? Because that's exactly what this energy feels like. Someone is beginning to understand that walking away from these feelings may have been much easier than living without them. And honestly, it feels like they're reaching a point where keeping everything inside is becoming harder than finally saying something. And let's get into your reading. The very first thing I'm noticing is distance. Not necessarily physical distance, although for some of you that may be true. What I'm really feeling is emotional distance. It feels like one person stepped back. One person stopped chasing. One person became quieter than before and started pouring their energy back into themselves. And somehow, that silence changed everything. The energy is showing me the Hermit almost immediately. What fascinates me about this is that I don't feel this card around your person first. I actually feel it around you. It's like you've been turning inward lately, spending more time with your own thoughts, focusing on your own healing, maybe even reaching a point where you stopped looking outside yourself for answers. You know, there comes a moment when someone gets tired of waiting for clarity from another person. They stop asking questions. They stop trying to force conversations. They stop trying to decode every little sign. And I feel like some of you may have reached that place. What is interesting is that the more you pull your energy back, the stronger your presence seems to become in this person's mind. They cannot seem to get away from it. I'm seeing the moon here, and this energy feels incredibly deep. There are emotions underneath the surface that this person has not fully acknowledged, even to themselves. They may tell themselves they're fine. They may tell themselves they're moving on. They may tell themselves they have everything under control. But their subconscious is telling a completely different story. Because when things become quiet, when distractions fade, when they are alone with their thoughts, your energy keeps showing up. Your name, your voice, certain memories, specific moments they thought they had already moved past. The Six of Cups is coming through so strongly here, and what I keep hearing is, why am I thinking about this again? It's almost like they are revisiting moments that once felt ordinary but now feel incredibly meaningful. A conversation, a smile, something you said, the way you made them feel understood, the way they felt comfortable being themselves around you. For some of you, this person is beginning to realize that what they miss isn't just the connection itself. It's who they became when they were around you. That realization feels much bigger than they expected. I'm also getting the sense that they don't fully understand why this is happening right now. That's the interesting part. Because from their perspective, they may have expected these feelings to fade. Time was supposed to make things easier. Distance was supposed to create closure. Life was supposed to move forward. Yet something keeps pulling their attention back toward Pisces. And the more they resist it, the stronger it seems to become. There seems to be a growing awareness happening here. A moment where they can no longer dismiss what they're feeling as coincidence. The Judgment card is stepping into this energy now. And it feels like an awakening that's happening little by little. Not all at once, not dramatically. Just one realization after another. One memory after another. One moment of honesty after another. They're beginning to see something differently than they did before. They're beginning to see you differently than they did before. And perhaps most importantly, they're beginning to see themselves differently than they did before. Because the absence they're feeling isn't just about missing someone. It feels connected to something deeper, something unfinished, something they haven't fully understood yet. And the more they sit with these emotions, the harder it becomes to ignore what their intuition is quietly trying to tell them. Something about this person's daily life feels very different than it did before. Not because their circumstances have completely changed, but because their perspective is changing. And honestly, that can be even more powerful. I'm seeing them trying to move forward, trying to stay busy, trying to focus on work, responsibilities, other people, other conversations. For some of you, they genuinely believe that enough time would help them leave these feelings behind. Yet every path they take somehow seems to curve back toward you. It's strange because I don't feel like they're intentionally searching for reminders. The reminders just seem to find them. A song they haven't heard in months. A place that suddenly brings back a memory. A random conversation that makes them think of something you once said. Little things. Tiny moments. Yet those tiny moments keep creating bigger emotions. The energy is showing me the Five of Cups, and what stands out isn't sadness alone. It's realization. It's somebody looking back and seeing things differently than they did before. You know how sometimes people only understand the value of something once it's no longer sitting right in front of them? That's the feeling I'm getting here. This person keeps replaying certain situations in their mind. Situations where they could have said more. Situations where they could have been more honest. Situations where they could have handled things differently. And the difficult part is that hindsight is becoming very clear for them. They can see things today that they couldn't see back then. Yeah, that's what keeps coming through. Clarity. Not because someone explained it to them, not because somebody forced them to understand, because life itself has been teaching them. For some of you, they've met other people. They've talked to other people. They've tried to create new experiences. They've tried to distract themselves with everything they could think of. Yet nobody seems to create the same emotional response. Nobody seems to reach the places inside them that you reached without even trying. Oh my God, I keep hearing this person say, why does everything keep reminding me of them? And I don't think they have a complete answer. The star is appearing here, and this energy feels softer than before, much softer. The resistance is fading. The need to deny their feelings is fading. The need to convince themselves that none of this matters is fading. It's almost like they're beginning to allow themselves to admit the truth. Not necessarily to you yet, not necessarily to anybody else, just to themselves. And that admission changes everything. Because once someone stops fighting what they feel, they begin looking at the situation through a completely different lens. I'm also noticing something very interesting around the Queen of Cups. There seems to be a growing appreciation for the emotional safety they felt around you. This isn't only about attraction. This isn't only about chemistry. This person is beginning to recognize how rare it felt to be understood, how rare it felt to be accepted, how rare it felt to be seen without having to perform or pretend. You may not even realize how much comfort your energy brought to this person. For some of you, they certainly didn't appreciate it at the time. Maybe they assumed it would always be there. Maybe they thought they had unlimited time. Maybe they believed they could come back to it whenever they wanted. Life has a funny way of teaching people otherwise. The Justice card is stepping into this energy now, and I feel like this person is quietly weighing things in their mind. Not just what happened, not just what was said. They're weighing their own choices, their own actions, their own role in creating distance, because it's becoming harder and harder to place the responsibility somewhere else. They know there were moments when fear spoke louder than honesty, moments when pride spoke louder than vulnerability, moments when avoidance felt easier than truth. And those moments seem to be standing in front of them now. The interesting thing is that this awareness isn't making them angry. It feels like it's making them humble. There seems to be a growing understanding that this connection held more value than they originally recognized. More depth, more meaning, more potential. And as that understanding grows, the feeling of loss grows with it. Not in a dramatic way, not in a hopeless way, just in a very human way. Like someone slowly realizing that what they have been searching for may have already crossed their path once before. And the more they sit with that realization, the more difficult it becomes to ignore the part of their heart that still wants to know whether that door is truly closed or if there might still be a way back toward it. A heavier energy starts showing itself here. Not because this person suddenly stopped caring, but because they're beginning to understand the cost of certain choices they made. And honestly, that realization doesn't feel comfortable at all. I'm seeing someone who has spent a long time trying to convince themselves that they were doing the right thing. Maybe they chose security over emotion. Maybe they chose familiarity over growth. Maybe they chose what looked logical instead of what genuinely felt right in their heart. Whatever the situation was, it feels like those choices are no longer bringing them the peace they expected. The energy is showing me the Ten of Wands, and I keep getting this image of somebody carrying far more than they let other people see. From the outside, they may appear fine. They may appear strong. They may appear like they have everything under control. Yet behind closed doors, it feels completely different. There seems to be emotional exhaustion here, mental exhaustion, even spiritual exhaustion, because the life they built around themselves is starting to feel heavier than it once did. For some of you, this person thought they could simply move forward and eventually forget about everything connected to you. They thought enough time would solve the problem, enough distractions would solve the problem, enough responsibilities would solve the problem. Yet none of those things seem to be working. In fact, they may be creating even more pressure. Yeah, that's the strange part. The harder they try to force themselves into a version of life that no longer fits, the more uncomfortable everything becomes. I'm seeing the devil appearing here, and this energy feels very personal. Not because somebody else is controlling them, not because of outside circumstances alone. It feels like they're confronting parts of themselves they've avoided for a very long time. Fear, control, avoidance, self-sabotage, old patterns that once felt safe, old habits that once felt necessary. You know, everybody has certain stories they tell themselves. Stories about why they can't do something. Stories about why something won't work. Stories about why they're better off staying exactly where they are. This person is beginning to question those stories. And honestly, I don't think they expected how uncomfortable that process would be. Because once you start questioning an old belief, other beliefs begin to crumble too. The Tower is stepping into the reading now, and wow, this feels significant. Not in a dramatic movie scene kind of way, more like a series of realizations happening one after another. Little truths becoming impossible to ignore. Little excuses losing their power. Little illusions falling apart. For some of you, something may have happened recently that forced this person to look at their life differently. Maybe a conversation. Maybe a disappointment. Maybe a situation that didn't turn out the way they expected. Whatever it was, it seems to have created a crack in the foundation of what they believed. And through that crack, they're starting to see things much more clearly. I keep hearing, what if I've been looking at this all wrong? That's such an important question, because that question changes everything. The moment somebody begins asking themselves that question, transformation begins. The Death card is coming through very strongly now. And no, this doesn't feel like an ending in the way people often assume. It feels more like somebody standing at the edge of an old version of themselves. A version built from fear, a version built from pride, a version built from trying to control outcomes. And they're realizing they can't carry that version forward forever. Oh my God. There is something almost heartbreaking about this energy. Not because they're losing something, because they're finally understanding what they already lost. The weight of that realization feels very real. For some of you, this person is looking back at moments they once dismissed and seeing them through completely different eyes. They're recognizing opportunities they didn't take, conversations they avoided, feelings they buried. And perhaps most importantly, they're recognizing the role they played in creating distance. There seems to be much less blame here than before, much less defensiveness, much less denial. Instead, I'm seeing somebody sitting quietly with the truth, not running from it, not arguing with it, just sitting with it. And while that truth may be difficult, it also feels like the beginning of something important, because every time an old belief falls away, space is created for something new to emerge. Every time fear loses its grip, another possibility becomes visible. Every time they stop pretending everything is fine, they move a little closer to understanding what truly matters to them. And the more these changes unfold inside them, the more impossible it becomes to ignore the growing feeling that there may still be something they need to say, and perhaps something they need to make right. A nervous energy begins to surface here. Not the kind of nervousness that comes from indifference. Quite the opposite. This feels like somebody who has reached a point where staying silent is becoming increasingly difficult, yet speaking up still feels terrifying. I'm seeing this person pick up their phone more than once. Not necessarily sending anything, not necessarily following through. Just staring at the screen. Thinking. Typing something. Deleting it. Starting over. Closing the app. Walking away, only to come back later and repeat the entire process again. The Page of Cups is showing up immediately, and honestly, this energy feels almost vulnerable in a way we haven't seen before. Because for a long time, this person seemed much more focused on protecting themselves, protecting their pride, protecting their image, protecting whatever walls they had built around their emotions. Those walls don't feel as strong anymore. In fact, they feel exhausting to maintain. You know, there comes a point when pretending becomes harder than telling the truth. I feel like they're approaching that point. For some of you, this person has already imagined dozens of conversations in their head. They've rehearsed what they would say. They've imagined your response. They've imagined every possible outcome. The problem is that each scenario ends differently, and that's exactly what's making them hesitate. Because uncertainty feels very real here. The energy is showing me the Two of Swords, and this person seems caught between two competing fears. One fear says, what if I reach out and nothing changes? The other fear says, what if I never reach out and regret it forever? And honestly, neither option feels comfortable. Yeah, that's what makes this energy so intense. This isn't somebody casually wondering about you anymore. This is somebody wrestling with themselves. Part of them wants clarity. Part of them wants movement. Part of them wants to finally stop carrying these questions around. Yet another part remains afraid of what they might discover. I'm also picking up something surprisingly tender. This person isn't only thinking about talking to you, they're thinking about being around you. There's a difference. A huge difference. Because conversation can happen through a phone, through a text, through a message. What I'm seeing feels more personal than that. They find themselves imagining ordinary moments, not dramatic moments, not fantasy scenarios. Simple moments. Sitting together, laughing together, sharing stories, seeing how you're doing, being close enough to feel your presence again. Oh my God, that's interesting. The Knight of Cups is coming through, and it feels like the emotional distance we've been seeing throughout this reading is beginning to feel unbearable to them. Not because they're desperate, not because they're obsessed, because they're realizing that imagination can only take them so far. Eventually, people want reality. Eventually, people want answers. Eventually, people want to know if the connection they keep carrying in their heart still exists in the real world. And that's where this energy seems to be heading. I also feel like this person worries about how they're perceived now. That's coming through strongly. They wonder if you've changed your opinion of them. They wonder if too much time has passed. They wonder if you've completely moved on. For some of you, they are especially afraid of being judged for choices they made in the past. Not because they believe you're a judgmental person. Actually, I feel the opposite. They know you're compassionate. They know you're understanding. The fear comes from their own guilt. Sometimes people fear forgiveness because accepting forgiveness requires them to fully acknowledge what happened. And I think that's part of the struggle here. There seems to be an awareness that if they come forward, certain truths may need to be spoken. Certain conversations may need to happen. Certain emotions may need to be faced. Yet despite all of that fear, the Eight of Wands keeps appearing in this energy. And every time I look at it, I get the same feeling. Momentum, not certainty, not guarantees. Just momentum. Something inside them is becoming harder to ignore. Something keeps nudging them toward movement instead of avoidance, toward communication instead of silence, toward honesty instead of hiding. The interesting thing is that their heart appears to be moving faster than their courage. Their feelings seem ready before their confidence is, which creates this strange push and pull energy. One day they feel brave. The next day they second-guess everything. One moment they're convinced they should say something. The next moment, they convince themselves to wait. Yet every time they try to create distance again, their thoughts seem to circle right back to the same place. The same person, the same connection, the same unanswered questions. And little by little, it feels like those questions are becoming important enough that they may no longer be satisfied. With simply wondering, a much softer energy begins to emerge here. After all the confusion, all the hesitation, all the internal battles, I'm seeing something that feels surprisingly simple. Honesty. Not perfect honesty. Not fearless honesty. Just the kind of honesty that happens when someone becomes tired of carrying everything alone. The Ace of Cups appears almost immediately, and the feeling surrounding it is very emotional. This person seems to be reaching a place where they're no longer asking themselves whether these feelings are real. That question has already been answered. The real question they're wrestling with now is what to do about it. You know, it's one thing to acknowledge emotions privately. It's another thing entirely to share them with the person they're actually about. That's where the vulnerability comes in. That's where the risk comes in. Because once words are spoken, they can't be taken back. Once feelings are revealed, they can't be hidden again. And I feel like this person understands that. For some of you, they have been carrying things they never properly expressed. Not because they didn't feel them, not because they didn't care, because they didn't know how. Or maybe they didn't believe the timing was right. Or maybe fear kept convincing them to wait for another day, another week, another month, until eventually too much time passed. The energy is showing me someone replaying conversations they wish they had handled differently, moments they wish they had been more open, moments they wish they had simply said what was in their heart instead of protecting themselves. Yeah, there is definitely regret here. Not dramatic regret, not self-pity, just a genuine awareness that some things could have been different. The Judgment card is stepping forward again, and it feels much stronger than before. Earlier it felt like realization. This time it feels like acceptance. Acceptance of feelings. Acceptance of mistakes. Acceptance of truths they can no longer run from. Oh my God, I keep hearing the same sentence. I should have said something. And what's interesting is that the sentence doesn't seem connected to one specific moment. It feels connected to many moments, many opportunities, many chances to be vulnerable. Many chances to be honest. Many chances to let you know what was really happening beneath the surface. The Two of Cups is appearing here, and what strikes me most is the desire to reconnect on a deeper level. Not superficially, not through small talk, not through pretending everything is fine. This person seems to crave something genuine, something meaningful, something real. For some of you, they don't just want to know how you've been. They want to know who you've become. There is a difference. They want to understand your world. Your daily life, your thoughts, your dreams, your routines. What makes you laugh? What keeps you awake at night? What you've learned while they've been absent. I'm seeing somebody who realizes there is still so much about you they want to discover. And strangely enough, that curiosity feels connected to affection. The more they think about you, the more they realize how much they genuinely want to understand you. The star is shining through this reading again, bringing a very gentle feeling. Hope, not certainty, not expectation, just hope. Hope that healing is possible. Hope that understanding is possible. Hope that whatever distance exists doesn't have to define the entire story. For some of you, this person has spent a long time assuming the worst, assuming you've forgotten, assuming you've moved on, assuming the opportunity is gone forever. Yet that assumption seems to be weakening, because another possibility keeps appearing in their mind, a possibility they cannot stop thinking about. The Chariot enters this energy with a completely different feeling than we've seen before. Earlier cards showed reflection. Reflection turned into awareness. Awareness turned into regret. Regret slowly transformed into desire. And desire is beginning to look toward movement. Not rushed movement. Not reckless movement. Intentional movement. The kind that comes after someone has spent a long time sitting with their truth. I feel like they're becoming increasingly aware that answers cannot be found through imagination alone. At some point, real conversations become necessary. At some point, questions need responses. At some point, two people need the opportunity to see what is actually there rather than relying on assumptions. There seems to be a growing understanding that whatever happens next, honesty may be the only path that brings peace to their heart. And the more that realization settles in, the more this person appears to be gathering the courage to step closer to a conversation they've been thinking about for much longer than anyone realizes. Whatever part of this message resonated with you, take it with you. And whatever doesn't, feel free to leave it behind. Remember, these readings are meant to offer reflection, clarity, and perspective. Your intuition will always know what belongs to your journey. There seems to be a lot of emotion moving beneath the surface right now. A lot of realizations. A lot of things that may not have fully revealed themselves yet. So be gentle with yourself. Give yourself permission to trust your own timing and your own path. And if someone has been thinking about you, missing you, or struggling to find the right words, trust that their journey is theirs to walk. Your job is not to carry their lessons. Your job is to continue honoring your own growth, your own healing, and the peace you've worked so hard to create. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I truly appreciate every single one of you. You mean more to me than you know. Take good care of yourselves, keep listening to your intuition, and keep choosing what brings you closer to your own happiness. I'll see you in the next reading. Okay? Bye-bye.